All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, all parts of the world, wherever you're joining us. Welcome to yet another Ethics First live talk. Today is Thursday, 3 p.m. Pacific, and I'm your host, Shilpi Agarwal, founder of DataEthics4All. And I'm joined with my colleagues and from the leadership team, Susanna Raj. Hello, Susanna.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. And Samantha Wigglesworth. Hi, Sam.
Good evening. Hello, everyone. Hi.
Good evening. And yeah, Sam is joining us from UK, and Susanna is also joining us from the Pacific, the West Coast, here in California, sunny California. Not too sunny today, but always good to be here. So great, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And if you've joined us for the past 5 live talks, or you've managed to see a recap of some of those, our intention to bring these Ethics First live talks to you is to bring food for thought for leaders with an ethics first mindset. Those who put people above profits and those who have ethics in their DNA. They value ethics above all. It is not an afterthought, it is by design. And it is at the forefront of everything they do. And to encourage more such leaders and to bring more food for thought, this is our weekly talk series. Today's topic is misuse of personal or private information. And really exciting topic because it is top of mind for everyone. Private information and the misuse of it is very common these days, and sometimes it's a gray area, and we don't even know that we have misused it. So today's talk will shed some light on what exactly is private or personal information, what is personal data, who has the right to use it, who has the ownership of that information, and when is it okay to share or not share or sell that information or use it publicly. So I hope that our discussion today will spur up some conversation and food for thought. And please join us. We are live on LinkedIn. Please join us with your comments and questions and even your thoughts. And we will be taking questions throughout the talk. So please feel free to chime in. So, all right. Welcome again, Susanna and Sam. How are you?
We're good. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
So let's start with like the first basic question. What is personal information? What is private information?
Well, we could start. Yeah, do you want to start, Susanna?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
go for
think,
it.
yes. I believe private information is defined in a very broad term legally. It actually, I did not know that until now that it's even your name is considered a private information. Your name, your full name, even your first name, your contact information, your home address, your IP address, and all any information that can be linked to you to identify you as an individual is considered private information. So,
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
called PII. It's personal identifiable information. So any information that can identify you, reveal you as a person, as opposed to anonymous, right? As opposed to a female living in California, age between this and this, that is all still a demographic information. There can be hundreds, thousands, millions of people with those same exact demographics. But when you put a few things together, then it's easy to uh, really identify a unique person. And so this PII is a unique identifier, anything that uniquely identifies you. Sam, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think according to legislation, when we look at legislation, personal data, and for me, it is really going to name, even surname, location. We could go as far as anything that's personally identifiable to you, and has an identifier essentially. And it's not just, like you said, demographic data. It might be, maybe just reference to health data as well. It does span quite a lot. There's a lot to cover. But yeah, and as I said, it could be ID data.
Yeah. And sometimes, go ahead, Sam.
Well, that's it. I think that we've covered a lot of it there, and we could go on with. There's a few more. That could go under that hat. There's quite a few. So yeah.
Exactly. And so the thing is, it's also sometimes a combination of these identifiers. For example, yes, even the first name, if not the full name, even the first name is considered PII, but there could still be many people with the same name. Like there could be many Shilpis in the world, right? But when you combine that with like more information, like exactly my healthcare data or my SSN or other things, then it's really, SSN is like it is very unique. So there is, just with an SSN you can identify that person. But even with a non uniquely identifiable information, if you combine multiple things with that, like if you combine my name and my, for example, my mobile number or something like that, or my zip code, then those are the things that narrow that search down, and then it is more easy to I clearly put that person in, like uniquely identify that person. And that's when that information truly becomes personal or private information. And so, like you said, healthcare data, yes, it can be, but like of different people. But when you bring it with the name and that demographic and that location, and in that office that there's only one person with that name working, then those are the kind of things that we need to be careful of how we reveal that information. Okay, so let's. What is considered data misuse?
Sorry.
Sam? Go ahead, Sam.
I don't mind. I was looking at this earlier, and I thought, well, for me, it's having someone's data, individual information, and using it, but really not using it for the intended purpose. That's what I would say. That's my definition. If you have individuals' data, it's not using it correctly. That's how I would say it. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily illegal, but it's not used for the intended purpose. I think, that's what I would say. What do you think?
Yeah, I would add to that. It's not only for the unintended purpose, but it also any data that you collect without permission, without consent, or you collect it for one use case and you use it for another use case, or you expand the use case without going back to the user and informing them again. All of those are considered misuses, and also in the realm of social media, releasing someone's private information because they had a contrarian viewpoint or political viewpoint, and then you want to reveal their personal information as a target. That all of those are data misuses.
Yeah, absolutely. You both nailed it on the head. Basically, I gave a talk at the DataEthics4Allᵀᴹ show. If you remember the kids conference, and it was about the ethical considerations of data collection. And that was a major topic that, consent, like Susanna was saying, and what Sam mentioned, like, yes, explicit consent. First of all, you have to take explicit consent for whatever data you're collecting from a user. And it has to have three key ingredients. It has to exactly notify the user what data you're going to collect, how the purpose of that data, what are you going to use that data for, and then the user should have the right to say no to that data explicitly. Even if you're asking for consent, there should be a clear way for them to say no. And if you go further, there should also be a way for them to revoke that permission. So not just that they've given you the permission once and you just have it forever. Whenever they say that, whether it's 6 months down the lane or 1 year down the lane, and you should also have a clear sunset policy, meaning when will that data expire. So it's not like you collect somebody's data with their permission and you hoard it forever, and then you use it for other purposes, for selling or what have you, right? So all of that collectively, it should be data misuse is data collected for the purpose that it was collected, and it is now being used for another purpose without the consent of the original consent of the user, right? So whenever, as a business, if we want to use the data we have collected for something else, we must go and inform them. That's not just ethical, but nowadays there are new laws that will ask you to do exactly that. So what are some examples of data misuse that we have seen in recent times?
There's been a lot since 2016. There has been so many misuses of data.
Yes.
Especially the Cambridge Analytica is one thing that comes to mind. And then, yeah, there has been one time when an FBI agent, she was an undercover agent, and her address and her name was, identified. Even though she was publicly identified as a person, the fact that she had another job related that was private undercover was, linked, both of them linked together. And that is when this whole doxing of information, taking somebody's information. Sam could be a teacher in the United Kingdom, but she could also be an undercover agent, somewhere working. But if I link link that information and leak it outside, that puts her life in danger, and that is called doxing. Like if I have a disagreement with her and then I know this information about her and I put it on social media
It's
and
called what?
expose
Off
her.
sync?
Doxing. Yeah,
Doxing.
doxing. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Doxing.
Doxing.
Okay.
And that was one of the major misuses that happened during the past administration in the United States. Then it was back and forth. The far right and the far left, each of them were doxing each other and, releasing private information, putting people's lives in danger, in just because they disagreed with a political viewpoint, or any agenda that they had. So those are the kind of misuses that has been happening, and especially with Twitter and Facebook. I mean, yes, the list goes on,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I
And
think
also Google and Amazon also, like basically all of these companies that have marketplaces, like Facebook's Cambridge Analytica started with the marketplace, right? There were apps, and the apps were collecting data from users, but those users explicitly gave information to Facebook. And then these other apps through the marketplace went and collected that data from the friends of the friends who actually played that game, right? So it's basically, I gave permission to this app to be able to collect data because I want to play that game. And now that doesn't mean that if I have whatever number of friends on Facebook, I'm also giving you permission to access the data of my friends, right? And so these marketplaces, I think, are a big loophole. Like Google got into a lot of fire hose basically to collect data, location data without explicit consent from the users, as well as Amazon's marketplace was doing that. They were collecting a lot of, it's still under investigation. It has not yet, the charges have not been formally brought, but there is an in-depth investigation going on with the EU's antitrust authority to see if competitively sensitive information from Amazon's marketplace has been used by the sellers to their advantage. And like you guys have already mentioned, Facebook, Twitter, all of them are under the radar for, Sam, do you want to add something to this?
Yeah, I was going to actually say that similarly to what we mentioned earlier, that Twitter is starting to reflect, review its privacy policies based on previous issues with uploading of videos and images, and that being used against individuals. So they've reviewed the policies based on that, and that's something that's quite recent. But yeah, I know, in the news in the UK, we know that data has been in the past misused, by organizations, for individuals that are quite prominent, quite famous. That's been in the news recently as well, where data's been obtained without permission, and that's something that we've seen quite a lot of here. Yeah. So, and obviously you've mentioned Google as well, and the collection of data from ads. And what I'm seeing is more companies now looking at solutions and how they can move forward, with this, and make their data policies and data protection policies more stringent and strong. So yeah, so we talked about it last week in the previous Ethics First Live talk about bounties being awarded to developers who can find loopholes and the gaps in whether that's software or web applications, and people are now really actively looking to do that, and they're hiring people to do that. So that's really positive. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a live viewer from Julia. Hello, Julia, from
Hello, Julia.
YouTube. So she's joined us live. Yeah, awesome. Julia, feel free to post any comments or thoughts on the discussion that we are having today is about what is misuse of personal information, and what are some of the examples that are that will show that yes, there has been extensive misuse of this information. Susanna, did you want to add something to what Sam already mentioned?
Yeah, there's been a lot going on in terms of controlling this misuse of information laws that each company is trying to bring up, and the one that Sam mentioned was Twitter came up with a privacy policy and
Yeah,
said you cannot post private images and
yeah,
photographs without consent, but then that policy was so poorly written, it was used against the people who are activists, trying to bring the people who are, causing violence and riots, bringing them to justice. They posted their images, and Twitter took them down, thinking that it was private information posted without their permission. How would they give permission to post those images? But those images were already public in another domain. So the policies are great if they are written, in a proper way, and they take into account everything, and all their variables goes back to my research, industry terminology. All your variables have to be defined. All
yes,
your terms and legal positions have to be well defined. So
yes.
you have to define what is private and what is not private quite thoroughly in order to have laws in place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were. It was a well-intentioned effort. They wanted to protect people. Like social media nowadays, it's full of You go to a party, people take pictures random. Like people take selfies, people take pictures. You are in the background, and then they post it on social media. They post it anywhere. Sorry.
Yeah.
And there's no consent. Like obviously I didn't give my consent. What if I am in a position where I'm not, I don't want it publicly on social media, whatever I am or wherever I am, and it's difficult to take consent from anyone, especially in a crowd. And so what do you do? Like how do you put something in place where there is, so that way you can report to Twitter and say, ask them to take it down, and they will review it. And so yeah, it was a well-intentioned effort, and something that definitely needs to be done, because on social media platforms, kids do it, we all do it. Like we post it, we want to brag about ourselves, but we forget that in the process, we may be hurting someone else's privacy or their private information, right? um, but yeah, like Susanna said, that it was the right-wing activists felt very happy that this policy is going to actually protect them, because now nobody will know the face of people who are actually deliberately causing intentioned harm to society. So obviously we don't want that. But I mean, to be fair, the policy said that you have to uh, appeal to be taken down, not that they will do it on their own, and then they will make a informed decision whether it was really. So in this case, if they see that it is an actual a right-wing activist group that is causing harm to society, then Facebook, Twitter can decide not to take it down and let it be a common knowledge that these are the kind of groups or people that are causing harm to society, and so stay away from those kind of things or protests. So I mean, you've got to start somewhere, because this has become a giant beast. Social media today has become a giant beast, and it's very hard, no matter how well intentioned laws you put in place. There's always, like, there's good and bad to it. So what is the difference between data misuse versus data theft?
I think what we see with these two definitions, they're slightly different. And misuse, as we've said, is where data isn't being used for its intended purpose, and you've not, as Susanna said, had the consent again, or you've not reviewed the consent and the permissions to use that data again as an organization. So that's misuse, where we don't use data for the right purposes. Whereas you get to moving on to theft, and it changes, and I think from what I can see, it's when there's been a data breach or potentially a cyber attack on a company, or on an individual's data, and it's taken without consent. That's what I would say. And there are laws in place to protect individuals because of that, but that's the difference in my view. You're not aware of it. You're actually not aware of it at all, I think. And
true. There's no consent of any kind, like whether it was for one purpose or another, there is no consent, period. It was not the consent was not given by the user for any purpose to that particular person or company or vendor or user or app for that purpose, that they decided to just steal that data and use it. That's literally what it means. It's basically theft. In some ways, what happened with Cambridge Analytica also can be considered theft, because the users only gave information consent to use that for their own purpose, but that app stole data from all of their friends, which is not it was not intention for it. It was not even asked. So it is called, it would be considered theft. So I mean, that's a pretty standard, unless Susanna, do you have anything to add to it?
No, it is theft is just taking something without permission. That's the basic definition of theft. You take something without permission, without informing the owner of that property, then that is theft. So basically, that's the basic definition, and that definition follows through for all data theft that has been happening in the industry.
I mean, misuse also, in some ways, it is still our data. So in both cases, we are the owners of the data, but in first case, we are willingly sharing it with someone. For whatever purpose we decide, whether we share our healthcare information with our doctor, and if our doctor sells this data to someone else, or somebody hacks into their system and takes that healthcare information for all the patients, then that's theft, right? So are there any laws today to protect us, the users, from companies misusing our personal information or stealing our data?
Well, we do have in the UK and in Europe policies around data protection. So we have the data protection law in the UK, which it's actually been reviewed recently. So that was reviewed in 2018. And that governs, again, the use of personal data and how it's collected and what we should be using it for. Yes, it's quite explicit. And then you've got the Computer Misuse Act as well, which covers the what we were just talking about, which is the risks that maybe data in an organization could be collected illegally. So we've got those two.
And we also have the GDPR and the CCPA, right? The GDPR
that's it.
And CCPA is for California, but I mean, it should be everywhere. It should be applied nationwide. It basically, CCPA stands for California Consumers Privacy Act. So it gives users protection for their data. So whenever you visit a website, even if the cookies are there, you can say, do not sell my information. You can explicitly ask for a company to share whatever information they have on you. They have to actually show it to you. And if you say that you do not want that information stored, please delete my data, they have to abide by that and delete all the information they have collected on you. And you can also fill out a form saying, do not sell my personal information. And in that case, they will not be allowed to make money out of your personal data. So those are some things that the California Consumer Privacy Act protects. And I will let Susanna talk more about the GDPR if she wants to add.
Yeah, the GDPR is much more broader than the CCPA in that it goes further into not only deletion of data, the right to forget your data, and also it's the definition in the Article 4.8 of the GDPR and also the European laws are very strict in how they define a person and personally identifiable information. A living person versus a natural person versus a legal person, they have different definitions, and they also define broadly, more in a granular way, the difference between corporate rights and individual rights. So all of those are much more better in the GDPR considering the CCPA. The CCPA is a good start for state of California. As far as the whole of United States, we don't have anything like that. So California is leading the way in that, but it still falls very much behind the GDPR in terms of defining what is a person, what is a legal identity of a person is versus a company. That
Yeah,
has been done very well by the GDPR.
absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
So go ahead, Sam. Yeah.
It's got to be, I think what I found really interesting and what you mentioned earlier about sunset policies is it comes up in this particular legislation as well, is that you have to, the data that you are using, if you're going to be utilizing it, it's got to be done lawfully. It has to be time limited and limited to what it's necessary to be used for, and accurate, and you have that then the right to request what information is being held on, in your name as such. So it's a broad range of parts of the legislation which are protected. And the UK is modelled on that. Both the UK legislation and GDPR operate together really.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially you mentioned this brought up the sunset. So data collection, especially with contact tracing, right? Everything that's happening with COVID, we have all these contact tracing apps, and even the government is doing that. Even schools are collecting data. What schools are doing, even in my kids' schools, basically they have a seating chart, and they want kids to seat every day in the same exact place, so that if somebody reports, then they can inform everybody who came in contact with the kid, right? And their parents. So I mean, it is well intentioned, and it is good for the purpose that it's serving right now. But once this hopefully COVID is behind us, and whatever data and information we have collected through contact tracing and COVID, we need to let it go, like have a sunset policy on that, and not keep that information. Like basically you have a minute by minute information on that, where you're going, what you're doing, which stores you're visiting. Like you have the entire information of that person. So it could be misused in a big way. And also, while I was talking about this talk that I gave for DataEthics4Allᵀᴹ, there was also this use case where H&M was collecting information on their employees, and they were basically asking every time an employee went on a holiday or took a vacation or took a personal leave, they were forced to have an interview with senior leaders, and they were asked to share more information than they they needed to. And then this information was used for understanding the religious preferences, and then also other things, among other things, and then also understanding and putting them on this corporate promotional ladder or whatever you want to call it, right? So all of these practices, they were fined, actually $41 million they were fined for, even like maybe they even wanted to just understand how, maybe it was well intentioned, maybe what they wanted to know is to be better understand their employees, to be able to give them better perks, create more things that will engage their employees. So maybe it was well intentioned, but the execution of that and the information, the data that was collected was more than it was needed. And so whenever, again, coming back to data collection, because the misuse of data starts with the data collection, right? So we have to really be very conscious and ethics minded when it comes to every stage of the data.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially with IoT devices now, that is another whole big area of security issues. Here in California, PG&E has smart meters,
Yes.
and smart meters collects all the data about when you do your laundry, how long you did your
Yeah.
laundry,
Yeah.
and when are your lights are on, when they are off. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it collects all kinds of information that if it was, it had also we went through a breach also. PG&E lost, I mean, 30,000 or 30 million. I don't remember how much, of information was breached.
Mm.
This is all, areas, why are you collecting this information? And the purpose is to know how much energy you are using. You don't need a granular details of each home and each individual's, user preferences. So we have to be aware of what is being collected on us, and we also have, as I believe, as an individual users, it's upon us
So
to
you know
become.
what PG&E is doing, right? Basically, they are not only seeing what time you're doing your laundry, but they actually have come up with different pricing points. So what they are saying, and again, where they are coming from with this information is that to reduce the load, to divide the load of the grid. Basically, they are saying that everybody comes back from work and maybe does laundry between 4 to 7, or between the morning times when there are not that many people working and people who are working from home. So they have actually, to reduce that, they have different pricing strategies for people who are doing laundries from 4 to 7 or on the weekends versus people who are doing it on other times of the day. So to your point, yes, they are collecting that information because they have the smart meter, they can do that, and they
Yeah.
are actually incentivizing people to do their laundry or do their chores or use less electricity on the really more loaded times when the grid is already overloaded, so that it doesn't get more load. So again, yes, it is well intentioned, but with data comes responsibility. With more data comes more responsibility. So the more information we collect from our users, we we want to use it well. We have to protect, secure it properly, so it is not susceptible to breaches. That is an ongoing task of the security officer, the privacy and the security. It's a nightmare these days for the privacy. Like we talked about ethical hacking, right? And the bounty and all of that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the jobs of the security, of the privacy and the security, or the CISOs, right? So it must be
Yes.
hard because you never know who is going to come after that. So, all right. So last question. Maybe two questions, and I think we are a little over time, but what can we do to better protect our data? Let's do that, and then we'll do one last question. Is there anything we can do as consumers to protect our data?
I think we can. I think outside of the company, we talked about that a little bit last week. We've just got to realize, and I think we're more aware of it now since the pandemic started and working from home. We talked about that a little bit as well, that being at
Yes.
home using IoT devices a lot more than we used to, and being on our computers at home, that actually, our work and private lives is blended a little bit, and we just have to be a little bit more vigilant of what we're doing online, what we're sharing,
Yes.
how we're sharing our information, and just generally be a bit more data literate. And I think that's what we try to do. We want to focus on that, and we want to develop those skills, don't we? And knowing where our data is, and requesting data if we want it, being a bit more, I think, willing to kind of understand the pitfalls and maybe some of the issues. And if we want to know more, we find out more and build our knowledge. And that helps. That will help, definitely. So being ready and reading around the topic, and visiting obviously our community as well, and learning about what we're discussing, and in our community online, and in these talks. That will make us more resilient. I think we've got to think about that, haven't we, going forward? Definitely.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is you're saying that basically it starts with information. We have to know our rights. We have to know where we are sharing our data, what others are doing with their data. If we are signing a consent for a 45-page, don't assume that you didn't read it and you didn't know it. It's your job to read it and understand it and make sure what it is going to be used for, right?
It's also your job to demand that the 45-page be a 4-page document. And it is within your right to demand those things. And it is also within your right to think, do you really need a coffee maker with IoT in it? Do you really need a washing machine with IoT in it? Can you walk and go and put on the damn switch instead of asking Alexa to turn it on for you? All of those things. What is the convenience and what is the freedom that you're giving up?
That you're paying for that
price that you're paying for it. And also incentivizing behavior is another thing that corporates are doing with our IoT information. So like we said, yes, it may be to lower the grade, the power grades and lower the times of the day. But also if they are changing the behavior of each individual household, and especially households that may have a disabled community member living in them, they may be using more power at different times of the day, and they may not be able to transition to that incentivized behavior that PG&E wants us to have. So also thinking about other communities who may not be able to accommodate your behavior modeling practices. So including all of those things, it's just it I don't think the burden should be only on us. It's like, it should be on you to read the 45-page document. No, I don't want to read a 45-page document. I want you to give me a 2-page document. It's also my right to demand those things and to make the laws work for us. That's my take on it.
All right. So I think with that, we will end this on a good note. So know your rights and demand your rights, and do not think that, if it's out there, then it's out of your hands. You still have control. The data belongs to you, and you have ownership of that information. You alone have ownership of that information, and you can now ask for the right to be forgotten, that data to be deleted, and not that data not to be sold to anyone else. And so you yourself are the only person who should be able to mint money out of your own data, no one else. So with that note, hope you got some good food for thought, and we'll see you next time. And thank you, Susanna and Sam.
Thank you, Shilpi. Lovely to see you again. Thank you, Susanna.
Thank you, Julia, for joining us, and for everyone who is going to watch this on demand. Please feel free to post your comments, and we are always listening, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.